This morning, we are really lucky to be welcoming the Brixton Umbrella Collective. Circle. I keep saying sorry. I've had it in my brain for months and I've been trying to get it out. I do a good job. Brixton Umbrella Circle, who are an independent, peer-led self-help group for older 50-plus LGBTQs. It offers a forum for mutual support, socialising and addressing individual and collective experiences, past and current, in a social, cultural and political context. Umbrellas provide shelter and is used as a term for covering all, and because our hearts and minds can be like umbrellas, useless if we do not open them. So yeah, I'd like to start us off.
Hello. Right, I'd like to invite you all to this meeting of the Umbrella Circle. This is what we do at every little gathering that we have. So today you are all part of our circle. Welcome. Okay. First off, may I introduce you to the Gay Liberation Front legend that is Ted Brown. We're about to show a video of him rather than ask him to talk, as distilling 6 decades of activism into a mere 10 minutes is a bit of a tall order. This video of Ted accepting a Pride Award from Attitude magazine is from 2021. So please ignore the out-of-date charity appeals on it. Video, please.
Of me kissing various guys in Hyde Park.
Oh, I think you need to put snap.
And people think we were being flippant, but actually the sentence for that kind of behavior could have been between 5 and 7 years in prison. My early years were in America. I was born in the States from Jamaican parents who divorced when I was about 5 or 6 years old. My mother had been involved in the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, which spun off into the civil rights movement. I was becoming aware that I was attracted to one particular boy in school. And when I was about 12 or 13, I remember waking up in a sweat because I'd had a dream in which we were not very sexual, but more than just friends and romantic. And I kind of worried that this was an indication that I was going to turn into what we then called sissy. And so I came out to my mother because I needed to talk to somebody about it. And I knew that she wouldn't attack me because of the kind of person that she is. But in fact, it was even more positive than I expected, because when she had been in the civil rights movement in America, one of the speakers who'd spoken to her about the civil rights movement was Bayard Rustin, who was the organizer of the great civil rights march at which Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. You can find a quote of Bayard Rustin saying in 63, which is 6 years before Stonewall, that one day homosexual people would be fighting for their rights, the same as black people were. I was organized the first 2 marches through central London. The first one was the 1971, the youth march, the Gay Liberation Front Youth March in protest against the unequal age of consent laws. At the first youth march, we had a kiss in, and there are photographs, which I've just been sent, of me kissing various guys in Hyde Park. And people think we were being flippant, but actually the sentence for that kind of behavior could have been between 5 and 7 years in prison. But we decided to challenge the police on the grounds that doing so publicly would show the public the kind of hostility and homophobia that we were facing. Those first few years of activism were just a reflection of what my mother had already been through in the civil rights movement, because One of the things that people don't realize is that the civil rights movement was not a single issue campaign. It was about getting justice for workers, for women's rights, for homeless people, all sorts of categories. It wasn't simply about overturning the racist segregation laws in America. And in fact, the British branch of the Gay Liberation Front was kind of launched by the Black Panther Party when they set up the Revolutionary People's Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1970, when Huey Newton, who was the commander of the Black Panthers, argued and wrote a letter, a public letter, saying that we should all work together and that gay people were not the enemies of the people. And in fact, many gay people could be even more revolutionary than black people. In 1982, I think it was, or 81, some young people were having a birthday party, and they insist that some white person stuck a lit oily rag through the letterbox and set the house on fire, and 13 teenagers died in the fire, and the police didn't investigate it properly, right? So they set up an organization called Lewisham Action on Policing for the black community to liaise with the police and try to impel them to respond on a fair basis. This is years before Stephen Lawrence, yeah. And so I went and worked for Lewisham Action on Policing for 10 years. But I also had a gay department in Lewisham Action on Policing, and I was an out black activist in Lewisham Action on Policing. And it was while there that I appeared on the Word TV program in response to Buju Banton's record Boom Bye Bye, advocating that gay people should be shot and killed by machine guns and all the rest of it. Just around that same time, Justin Fashanu was discovered by the Sun newspaper to be gay. The Voice newspaper came out very, very strongly against Justin. Now, Justin was a very successful footballer. I think he was he was certainly the first black footballer to be worth £1 million in 1990. And they did headline articles featuring Justin's brother, saying, "My brother is an outcast, it's shameful that he's gay," and so on and so forth. So we went for The Voice, had a year-long campaign, a boycott, and won a right of reply, which I think was very successful. The Voice started having gay adverts and so on. That was very successful. Black Lesbians and Gays Against Media Homophobia. I've still got some of their posters, but we existed before online communication. So you won't find us online, but I still have copies of our documents and the letters of support that we have. I have a whole folder. Well, we've become aware of two factors. The first one is that the early Gay Liberation Front paid very little attention to older people, very similar to the rest of society. Unfortunately, once you reach a certain age in this culture, you're almost invisible. And we've become aware of severe problems in the care community and the care facilities in this country. The needs and the emotions and the self-identity of elder LGBT people are as valid and as essential as those for young people. And we shouldn't abandon those people when they wind up in care facilities that do not cater for them. My opinion of the LGB Alliance and their attacks on trans community is surprise and disappointment. I'm also surprised and shocked by the vehemence of their attacks. They don't just criticize trans people, they seem to hate them. and hatred is not a feature of any progressive rights campaign. LGBT pride used to mean a determination by people in the LGBT community to support each other and to support others in their self-identity, in their search for rights. What's happened is pride has unfortunately become a commercial celebration with almost no focus on the need for rights within this country or abroad, where LGBT people are suffering considerable abuse and need support. The message I would like people to take from my Pride Award is that individual action is extremely important. In the same way that prejudice and hostility is inflicted by individuals to individuals and collectively turns into a serious social problem, so too action and in support of human rights on an individual basis has an effect on society as a whole. And an example I would give is from what happened with George Floyd. It was the action of that young woman keeping the camera on Derek Chauvin and George Floyd for 9 minutes that led to the Black Lives Matter movement, to the publicity and the outrage of the general population, and for once actually caused a police officer to be taken to account for the brutality that was being inflicted on the Black community.
Thank you, Ted. You'll all get a chance to ask him lots of questions in the Q&A after you've all spoken. Now, let me introduce you to our next speaker. Ian Townson here is the author of the Revolting Gays website. I urge you to look at that. And Ian was a Brixton fairy in the 1970s. Over to you, Ian.
Right, okay. And now for something completely different. Follow that. Okay, I mean, this, we've got probably about 24 images to show, but before that, a brief introduction. The images are roughly from the early 70s to the early 80s, and it's about the squatting of the first ever gay community centre, and the subsequent development of about 10 gay squatted gay community on Railton and Mayall Road in Brixton, which is in the London Borough of Lambeth, and the development of all of that. And it was really about trying to set up an alternative society to what already existed for gay people. We didn't use the alphabet LGBT then, it didn't exist. There's no concept of identity politics then. We had a very different kind of relationship to then. I won't do a big introduction. Shall we just show the first one? Turn around for this one. Swiveling. Okay. Can we see that okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You can? Okay. Okay, this first one, this is the gay centre at 78 Railton Road, Brixton. It no longer exists, it's now been demolished. I show this on, I do a queer tour of Brixton, walking tour, or at least I used to before my knees gave away. So thankfully before that, we actually did do a film of the walking tour, which will be added to the website soon when it's edited. And next door to it, if you look at where the man is reading the newspaper, that's one of the 3 women's centres that was on Railton Road at the time. And among other things, that Women's Centre was the headquarters of the National Abortion Campaign, because at the time there was an attempt to overturn abortion rights, and the women had to fight against that. So that features in the queer tour of Brixton, and there's our crowd there. And that's inside the gay centre. It was very, very popular at the time. It provided an alternative to the commercial gay scene, which there wasn't very much of it. It was overcrowded, it wasn't very hospitable, it was expensive, and a lot of people who used the centre were unemployed. They couldn't afford to go anywhere else. We ran everything there, from a very popular disco to modern dance. We even had a gay wrestling group, which caused some controversy at the time. I'll come to that later. And as you can see, people are having a good time, and there is indeed the gay wrestling group. Some people objected to this and said, you can't have a gay wrestling group, all this sort of, this macho posturing, we don't want all this importing into the gay centre, all this masculine macho posturing, the things we're trying to get away from, that oppress women and gay men and gay women and lesbians. We don't want it in our gay centre. I mean, they're about as macho as so that was one of our activities, a gay wrestling group, and we had a modern dance group, discos, and this is a domestic scene in one of his squats. I think this is 159 Railton Road, and I mean, we could do everything there, from just hanging out, eating together, discussing the weather, discussing future campaigns, whatever. And I think this is probably mid to late 70s. Okay. Oh,
Sorry, I'll go back.
Oh yeah,
Forward.
Oh yeah, and we did think, yes, and we did everything from cutting each other's hair, doing the shopping, doing the housework, whatever, doing the washing up. We did have a rudimentary attempt at having rotas. God knows how it all worked, but it seemed to. We tried. We did have a chance at communal living. This is trying to break down this whole idea of getting away from the idea of the nuclear family, where the conventional way of living is the wife would do all the housework and the cleaning, husband would go out and do the work, where we wanted to get rid of all that conventional way of doing things, and we would share all of the whole way of living, communal way of living. And this is a communal meal we all had together at 148 Mayo Road, where we all did the cooking, we all ate together, and so on and so forth. Yep. Oh, yes. Here we are. Steady on, maestro. You're going far too hard. Go back. Yep. Yeah. And this is 146 Mayo Road, the basement. There's Alistair in the background, and there's Tony. Tony is my partner, who nowadays has a Mohican cut, believe it or not. Again, I mean, they're just sharing the kitchen and so on and so forth. There we go. In the garden, here we are making our own music. This is in the very early stages. Nowadays, the garden has been completely transformed. We've knocked down all of the dividing walls, and it's now one huge, huge garden. It's been replanted. All of the garden, the shrubs and the flowers and trees have been replanted. You can see it's still. Oh no,
sorry. I'll get this right in a minute. I apologise.
That's new. You can see it's still in its early stages because old fridges have still been dumped there. We haven't gotten rid of them yet, and old mattresses that we haven't got rid of. But as you can see, it's just how do we make our own entertainment and so on and so forth. Well, yes. Oh, yes. Right. And here's Terry. Terry with his Terry with his homemade tutu. He's obviously auditioning for the Royal Ballet, or was it the Bolshoi? I'm not quite sure. Again, this is in the garden, so you can do everything from camping it up to. We did everything for rehearsing for the some of the Brixton Fairies theatre productions, or making banners for some of our campaigns. Malcolm Greatbank stood as we actually stood a candidate for local elections in 1974, and also the general election in 74 as well. There were two types of elections. We beat the Liberals, by the way. I think we got 223 votes. We joined with trade unions and left organisations to picket a fascist organisation called the National Front, who stood a candidate in a local election in Brixton. And this is Alistair from the Brixton Gays with his Fairies Against Fascism placard, picketing the election campaign by the National Front. Okay, Maestro. We're picketing a Brady's, the Railway Tavern, otherwise known as Brady's in Brixton, because they'd thrown out lesbians. They'd barred lesbians from drinking there. So we decided to picket it to get them reinstated. I'm not quite sure what the outcome of that, whether they were reinstated or not. But obviously we were not going to let the landlord get away with barring lesbians from the pub. Yes, this is the riots, not riots, correction, the uprising in Brixton in 1981 because of racist violence by the police, chiefly against black youth, which caused the uprising. And this is the burnt out remains of the Windsor Castle pub. I chose this one because it's one of the pubs that we were thrown out of as gay people. They barred us from it. And this is Brixton Police Station. You can see the Brixton Gays banner there. And these are mostly black people picketing the police station, where several people died in police custody. Black youth died in police custody in the police station. But it was against the sorry. I think it might be good when I finish speaking, and then you can. And also it was against the stop and search laws, the SUS laws, which this stupid government is now reintroducing. So it was against the SUS laws and against deaths in police custody, and also in other police actions in and around Brixton, which should cause other deaths as well. Okay.
I will get the sign right in the mood.
Off you go. Right, okay. Brixton Gays welcome anti-fascists. This is Railton Road. This side is where all the squats were. And we all came out in drag on top of the window ledges and whatever, and standing up here. Between 80 and 100,000 people came along Railton Road against the National Front and the British movement, who had been attacking gay people and black people and Asian people, whatever. They were very, very active in the 70s, and this was our banner strewn across Railton Road. And they came along here and had a Rock Against Racism festival in Brockwell Park, and that was 1978. So we made that banner to welcome the anti-fascists. Of course, Lesbian and Gay Support the Miners, 1984. They went to the South Wales, Dulais Valley, supported the miners' strike in 1984, and they clubbed together and actually got a van for the miners. And they were welcomed. They were a bit worried about not being welcomed, but they were, and that was great. All of these were to demonstrate that our solidarity with other groups, not just amongst ourselves, but with with other Labour and anti-racist groups as well. I think there's more. One more. Yes, this is Miss Jybin Desai, brilliant woman who led the strike at Grunwick, which we also supported. Some of us went from Brixton. I went, and Bill Thornycroft and a few others, just to give support, solidarity with the strike at Grunwick's. Bill Thornycroft got arrested by the SPG and thrown into the back of a van by them, and unfortunately they lost the strike. This was a strike for basic trade union recognition, but it was mostly Asian women who led the strike. But it wasn't just about that. They were being sexually harassed and and appalling working conditions as well. So we supported that strike action. Yeah. Okay. Yes, troops out of Ireland. Yeah, we were against the occupation of the north of Ireland by British troops, and against the imprisonment of Irish political prisoners. So we supported the troops out movement, self-determination for the Irish people. And we, some of us actually went to Belfast as well, supporting it here in Britain, mainland Britain. Okay. Oh yes, sorry, it's a bit blurry.
Might as well.
This one, yeah. We started, the South London Gay Liberation Front started in 1972 at the Minette Public Library in Lambeth, London Borough of Lambeth. But we got pushed from pillar to post because of hostile landlords and, publicans throwing us out and the customers throwing bottles at us and whatnot. But despite that, we did manage to do some campaigning. It was our ambition to proclaim ourselves as gay liberationists in every single town centre in South London. I think we managed 4 in the end. So this is one in Croydon, and this is 1973. And this is us with placards saying, gay liberation, we're here, we're queer, and we're not going away, kind of thing. So this is 1973 in Croydon. Okay. I had to include this. Brixton Fairies Theatre Group, we produced probably 4 or 5 plays, lots of sketches and cabarets. This is probably at Hammersmith Town Hall, and this is, I think we did a gay version of Andy Pandy, a children's programme. We did a gay version of it, and among other things. And we did, I mean, I won't go through all of them because of restrictions on time. I mean, this is normally, I would show, this would take about 1.5 to 2 hours to show the whole thing. So and this is a roller coaster ride through it all. But
Yay, thank you. Sorry.
Right, I think this is the last one, isn't
Yes.
it? Yeah. Finally, you're saying, this is the queer walking tour of Brixton, and this is me with the cast of on Railton Road. They did a recreation of the Brixton gay community, but they used as a centerpiece out of it, which, Mr. Punch's Nuclear Family, which is one of the plays that Brixton Fairies did. They used that as a centerpiece. It was very, very successful, and this is the cast. And I took them on a queer tour of Brixton and enjoyed it very much. And I think that's it.
Thank you so much.
Right. And now, may I introduce? Could I introduce? And I will introduce Clare Truscott. Now, Clare has been involved in queer activism since the 1980s. She was very involved in the 1992 Europride, indeed. Yes, indeed. And she's been involved in the 80s. she even enjoys failing to attempt herding cats, among other things. But she's very involved in Brixton Umbrella Circle. So away you go, Claire.
Yeah. I'm going to stand up. Yeah, I can see you. Actually, no, I can't. Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to say a bit more about the Umbrella Circle. We were started by 3 old lefties who wanted to support each other and felt there wasn't enough fun things for older queers to do. They were inspired by the therapy of gay men's heart circles and the solidarity of lesbians and gay support the minors. 2 of them had been in LGSM back in the 1980s. The circle is still a grassroots community group with no rules or hierarchy. We do all sorts of events and meetings. But basically, we're trying to look out for each other and combat social isolation that comes from the fact that all the venues that we used to go to have closed. And lots of our friends and partners have died. And also from the debilitating effects of illness and old age. The circle is made up of all sorts of people, of all genders, all sexualities, from different places, different incomes, from all sorts of backgrounds. All LGBT people over 50 are welcome. Only a few of the circle were lesbian and gay activists back in the day, and there seems to be no political consensus amongst us. So what do we actually have in common? Well, apart from the fact that we actually went to a lot of the same parties and discos. We've lived through times of great change. We share a time in history before the internet, a time that is largely unrecorded. We've lived through the trauma and the losses of the global pandemic of HIV and AIDS. And we remember those times before any equality laws, before the equal opportunity legislation of the 1970s. So the Equal Pay Act of 1970, the Racial Equality Bills in 76, and the Sexual Equality Acts of 75 and 79. So a lot of us were already adults before those times, or were growing up during those times. Back then, we were legally refused access to education, jobs, or accommodation. Until 1990, we were all classified as mentally ill by the World Health Authority. Some in the circle suffered aversion therapy because of it. Back then, we were scum of the earth. We were only pretended family. We were all outside. I couldn't have ever imagined the changes that have happened in the law, the civil partnerships and marriage rights that we have now. I found it dizzying to understand the shift in public attitudes just in my adult lifetime. Lots of us older queers do. When I came out in the 1980s, and this is just a random selection of photos of various pride marches and strength marches and protests, all from the 1980s and early 90s. The scene was entirely hidden. It was behind closed doors and blacked out windows. I had no way of knowing what the Gay Liberation Front had done only a decade previous. Or that the campaign, the CHE, the Campaign for Homosexual Equality, had started before I was born, very near to where I grew up in Lancashire. I had no idea because our history was completely invisible. There were no visible lesbians. So when I was struggling with heterosexual expectations, I had no idea there was any alternative. I'd never read about a lesbian in a book or seen one in a film or on TV. Lesbians may well have been mythical creatures like giants or fairies for all I knew. Coming out for me was a step into the unknown with no guide or role models to follow. So what changed for me was in 1982, I saw some graffiti. Now, you wouldn't think graffiti could change somebody's life, but this graffiti changed my life. It said in foot-high letters in Victoria Station in London, lesbians are everywhere. So I went looking. Back up in Preston, up north, I found a scene so small that it fitted in one room. Everyone, men, women, trans, old, young, we all mixed together. When I moved to London, I found there wasn't just one scene, there were dozens. men only, women only, very specialised venues, lots of separatism, except at Pride. My first Pride was the one depicted in the film Pride, which I don't know if you've seen the film, but I urge you to see it if you haven't, which shows the story of lesbians and gays supporting the miners. Up to then, I'd never seen more than a couple of hundred gay people in a club. So can you imagine the effect of seeing over 12,000 queer people marching on the street together in daylight? Absolutely mind-blowing. I saw the miner's wife, Sian James, give a speech at that Pride about friendship and solidarity that had been shown to her village by the LGSM law. And that meant that if one of her children said they were gay or lesbian, she would be proud. Not a dry eye in the house. In 1988, the fight against Clause 28 really brought us all together too. Yeah, against the threat to ban the promotion of homosexuality by local authorities. It was in the utter gloom after that, of when Section 8 when it became Section 28 of the local government, that I joined the Pride Committee, as Pride seemed to offer the only glimmer of hope. It took a certain bravery to be out back then. Lots of young men I knew had been arrested for things like snogging in a car, visiting a public toilet, having a 19-year-old boyfriend. I was quite outlandish and brazen, as you can probably see in a few of the photos. But lots of people weren't. They couldn't be. You know, if they wanted to keep their jobs and their families and their place to live, they had to be discreet. And lots of people still are being discreet to survive. Pride was all about improving visibility and building solidarity for us all. It's almost forgotten now, but in 1992, the first ever Euro Pride event, which I think this is of, helped cement European lesbian and gay solidarity with attendance of 100,000 people from all over Europe and a free party in Brixton. Before then, the average straight person had never heard of us. They'd never heard of Pride. There is nothing new about not conforming to gender or sexual norms. It's just the concepts to frame the ideas around that, or the language that we use to describe it, that changes. Back then, we used to say lesbian and gay. Back in Ted's time, gay used to mean everybody. The letters LGBT and LGBTQI only came later. Queer only came in the 1990s, but lots of older people don't like the term queer. I'm quite happy to use all those terms interchangeably as long as they're not being shouted in hate at me. Things never stay the same, and it's sometimes hard for our generation to catch up with new terminology. We find ourselves struggling to keep up with the latest ideas and words. I'm sensing a growing rift and tension between old and young because of that. Language is being used as a weapon to throw hate at each other. The media wants to stir up arguments between LGBTQI people. Yes, there may be differences in opinion between us, but please don't don't ever stop talking. And when I say talking, I mean talking and listening. In person, not rowing via Twitter. Yeah, that was me. That was in 89. Right. While many things have changed legally and socially, there are still many, many heterosexual people who are completely unaware. They have no idea. The changes in the law didn't protect Ted's late partner, Noel. You may have read about their story in The Guardian recently. Ted and Noel had been together for over 50 years. They met in 1971, before that first Pride March. But the care staff looking after Noel didn't understand about their civil partnership and excluded Ted from meetings and decisions about Noel's care. Noel was physically abused in a care home by the very people who were supposed to look after him. But Ted is strong, and he's gone on to win a court case in the UK. It's the first in the UK to name that abuse was homophobic. This is not how our older generation, the people who fought for our gay liberation, this isn't how they should be spending their old age, their final years. Even now, Ted is standing up for raising awareness of the abuse of all LGBT people in the adult care system. Well, all the people in the adult care system. And I'm doing my best to support him. We're demanding the provision of queer welcoming carers and care homes in our local authority. I'm arranging a series of monthly workshops to educate ourselves and my friends and peers. We call our campaign Not Going in the Care Closet. And I hope you will all stand in solidarity with us and contact me if you want to know more about that campaign, because we want to make it a national campaign and to address it everywhere. I can't speak for everyone in the circle, but I'm for the politics of inclusion, of solidarity, of sharing, of kindness. I'm against the politics of division, exclusion and hate. It serves all those who hate all of us very well if we bicker amongst ourselves. The minority of rich white men who own most of the world have always benefited from divide and rule. The rest of us are the global majority, and we need solidarity between us all LGBTQI people, old and young. As Audre Lorde said, ageism is another distortion of the relationship which interferes with our vision. By ignoring the past, we are encouraged to repeat its mistakes. The generation gap is an important social tool for any repressive society. If the younger members of a community view the older members as contemptible or suspect of excess, they will never be able to join hands and examine the living memories of the community, nor ask the all-important question, why? This gives rise to a historical amnesia that keeps us working to reinvent the wheel every time we have to go to the store for bread. I thank you.